And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Morgan Johnson, who bravely served 2 consecutive 20 and back tours with the Secret Space Force after being recruited from her position in the Army. There she reached the rank of ship commander, which is rarely held by women. Morgan, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. And if you don't mind, let's start in the beginning, or I guess somewhere near the beginning. In the Army, I guess it would probably start from there.
Right. Yes. And I was not excited about going into the Army at all. My mom had to force me in. The recruiter showed up at my house after I had been out with friends, and I signed I think a 6-year contract. I only ended up doing 3.5 here. But I became an informations operator analyst, so 25 Bravo. And that was somebody that was doing computer networking. And I did that for about a year prior to the Space Force.
How were you recruited?
I was the assistant to my first sergeant. And he had just told me one day that the commanders of the post and some other random high-level officials wanted to come see me. And so when they got there, they pulled me into a room and just offered me this thing called the 20 and back. I didn't really ask any questions. I didn't really care what the specifics were because it was just too exciting. I wanted to go. And I signed the papers that evening. They didn't really talk much about what we were doing, just kind of said, we're going to space. And I said, okay, that sounds good to me. They said, you can't tell anyone, and you're not going to remember the trip once you get back. That they had this technology where they would bring me back into my exact timeline to where I would be the same age as when I left, when I was done, which I didn't understand, but I didn't really care. It was too exciting. It was too much fun.
Did you believe it when they offered it to you, like to come back in your same timeline?
That sounded strange. I didn't have there was nothing to refer it to, right? Like I hadn't even seen that in a movie. There was just no reference of like what that even would mean or entail. I didn't care. I was too excited that the opportunity was there, and that I felt special because I was being picked for this. So like that was the only emotion I was worried about at that time.
It's fascinating that they told you up front, you're going to be gone for 20 years and then we're going to bring you back.
That's about as much as they gave me.
So you sign the paperwork, and then what happens?
So then it was literally the next day that they came to get me, and they just took me. So I was at Fort Lewis, Washington. I hate to put like military bases on blast, but the direct neighbor to Fort Lewis is McChord Air Force Base. And so they took me from Fort Lewis to McChord Air Force Base to an underground terminal. And we got into a spaceship there that looked like a fighter jet, but it was made out of like a glass-like substance. And that, when the doors to what was our roof opened up, which was the floor to the actual base, and we just lifted up above the ceiling and then into space, and there was camouflage so no one could see that we were leaving the Earth's atmosphere. And within a few minutes, I want to say, we hyper jumped out of Earth's orbit and into space, moving towards the moon. That memory has been a little bit difficult for me to grasp fully onto. I know it was between 1 and 3 days that we spent moving through space. And my understanding of that wasn't that we needed to take that long, but it was more that we were getting acclimated to being in space.
When you were in the ship, was there gravity, like being on the planet?
Yes, completely. It would be just like being in an airplane, except the entire, like the space where everybody was sitting was in a circumference circle around the craft, and the actual monitors and the way that they controlled the flight was in the center.
Was there a bunch of people also joining up with you?
I don't remember exactly how many. There was not many people. My ex-boyfriend, I say that he was my ex-boyfriend now, but at the time he was my boyfriend. He actually was recruited to go as well. And he was like a very super genius, really smart guy that made a lot of sense for him to be one of the people to come with. But they didn't tell either one of us that we were allowed to tell each other. So we were surprised with that information. Once we got to the ship, we found out we were both going together.
Did they know that you had this relationship with your boyfriend?
Yes, yes. We had been long term up until that point. And we were together years once we both got back after that.
Do you think that they picked you both so you could continue your relationship?
I think they had some sort of plan. I think there's always a bigger plan. I'm not 100% why they brought both of us, except I know I just feel like it was two separate things. He was a very, very smart genius, like overachieving super soldier. And I had this background with other, we'll say, government projects. And so those two things came together.
All right, so you're in space for a couple days. Then where do you go?
We went straight to the moon. We went to get our new uniforms and our duty assignment.
What were your uniforms like?
Most of them were black during the entirety of my enlistment. A couple of times they were different colors. Those will be in the book. I can't recall exactly because each duty station probably had a separate, especially when I was in like the Stargate, and like the more dangerous ones had different colors because needed to be a distinction. But the typical one was all black and it had a collar. I mean, very similar. It sounds silly to say, but like a typical Star Wars, just plain uniform that everybody wore.
It wasn't like a skin tight one?
No, no. More of like a military uniform fitting.
Once you arrived at the moon, did they give you a new job or position?
Yes, so I was taken into the commander of the moon, which was a female. I was taken into her office. She gave me some warnings and information about like realizing that some stations and ships in space like didn't have many women, and also didn't see many women for really long periods of time. So she kind of gave me some warnings about stuff like that. She also signed me out an electric baton just in case I needed it for my own protection. And then she told me to protect me, that she was going to send me, and then they were also sending my boyfriend at the time to officer school, because because I think because they wanted me for a full 20 years, and not everybody always does a full 20 years, and they wanted to protect me by my rank. I was a 5 foot tall, very small female, and so they wanted to make sure people had to respect me. So she gave me a day to think over what kind of job or what kind of schooling I would want to do to pick the job that I wanted. I chose on my own to go to school for psychology and to learn about humans. I was very excited about learning about humans. I've always been fascinated by them, intrigued by people in general. And I knew that I was going to learn more information that I couldn't learn on Earth. And so she said that that was okay, because she said that I could become kind of an ambassador towards creating good morale between races. So that was the goal for me.
Up to this time, have you seen ETs yet?
Not while I was in the military. I had when I was younger, when I was about 15, was the first time I was introduced to them. And I had an abduction when I was right before I left for the military. So I had seen them then, but I didn't get those memories back till later on in life.
I didn't realize that you had contact prior to even joining the military.
Yes.
I wonder if that's one of the reasons why they chose you, because they knew about that.
Well, I think it was a bigger scheme because I was in the projects. So the projects that I was in with the government when I was very little, I was being prepped for the Secret Space Force since I was a kid.
You underwent some sort of psychological education to be like a psychologist or something.
Yeah.
And then what did you do?
I didn't really use any of it. I did do about 5 years at that school. It was on Alpha Centauri. It was called Outpost 347. That was the school that most people in the galaxy were sent to for officer training. There were other beings there. There were like Lyran beings. They weren't very nice to us humans. Humans are kind of seen as like little children when it comes to being in bigger groups of ETs. They kind of turn their nose up at us a little bit. And there's always some that are very nice, of course, but it's just kind of a social ranking system. We're kind of at the lower end of.
What did the Lyrans look like?
So the Lyrans that I met they looked like they had lion and lioness, so they had feline features on the face, and the rest were humanoids. They did have fur. A lot of the beings that I met there, I don't have a lot of recollection of. I remember more beings on like Mars and things like that.
Where is Alpha Centauri?
It is our closest neighboring solar system. I want to say 4 light years away. It's around about 4 light years away.
And so are you on a planet similar to Earth in that system?
It was a rocky planet, yes. There was orange like dust. There wasn't a lot of trees, and the trees that were there was just very few. It was more of like a deserty place. The building was made of like full copper. They were using the conduction, I believe, for some sort of powering mechanisms within the school. And there were like blue trees and a few bushes, and there wasn't many animals or anything like that there.
Did you spend most of your time indoors?
Yes. Yes. There were 2 suns, and I think there's even a third one, if I'm not 100% on that, but there were 2 suns that were seen by us all the time, and then one really bright star that was a sun at night. So the details to that will come back to me, but
I'm guessing that you and the Lyrans and what other ETs could all breathe the same air, like oxygen?
yeah, so I think that's what they were doing with powering through using the copper as a conductor of some kind. So most races that have evolved past where a human can get to at this point are able to and have learned how to change their DNA to adapt to other worlds. It is very common to have many beings be able to live on one planet. For sure. They just adapt themselves.
How are you able to speak to each other language-wise?
So I had an implant in the back of which is still there, in the back of my ear that turned all alien speech into English, and everyone else had that same ability. So like we had these writing pads or these, it'd be like an iPad, but they were clear, and those iPads would have our own language, and like I would see in class other people's language, and there's no way I could read what they were getting sent, but so I couldn't read it physically, but I could hear it.
Would you consider that school to be some sort of officer training school? Or
Yes.
What was it like?
It was difficult because I didn't have a lot of friends. It was interesting because I fell into a relationship after my ex and I didn't work out with one of my non-human teachers who was from Raya, who was a female who had pointy ears, but otherwise was fully humanoid. And me and her started a relationship right before I was leaving. And so me and her ended up, she had a past history where she was going to be put into a arranged marriage, and we wanted to be together. So we looked, we heard there was some volunteers needed for a secret Stargate team that was out in the middle of nowhere. There was very few people there, and me and her both got that enlistment we were enlisted there for about a year.
And what type of being was she again?
So she's from Raya, and so Ryanian, I'm not sure, right? Some kind of right. That's as much as I know, is that she's from Raya. So
Where's Raya?
I do not know at this point. I have no idea. Somewhere else.
All right. So you were at this Stargate thing. Is that anything like the TV show?
That is a lot like the TV show in some ways, and then not in others. So there was only 10 people allowed on base. It was a very small, tiny disc, and it was very highly classified, where people could not just come and go. The commander of that ship worked with us, and there was very small teams. So like in the show, if I can remember, I haven't seen the show in like, gosh, 10 years probably. There were big teams, lots of people. It was a big ordeal. For us, it was very concentrated, very small. We had 3-man teams. We each had a hovering buggy machine, different types. One was cargo, one was arsenal in case we needed it. And what was the other one? Oh, I can't even think of it at this moment, but things that we needed. Cargo, arsenal. Oh, and then the other one was fit to go underwater if we needed it. So it was just a specialized, they call buggies the personalized vehicles, but these were bigger than that.
So was it like the show? Were you traveling through a portal to other realms or other worlds and back and forth?
Yes. So the reason that we were brought there was to explore other worlds. So the Stargate itself is a manufactured portal that connects to the natural portals all over the galaxy, and wherever it wants to be pointed towards, and how, depending on how strong it is how far it can reach. We were told, or at least I guess we assumed, and I think we were told, that we were looking for something in case we destroyed Earth. So there was this draconian reptilian being. I don't know why I said draconian. I'm going to say reptilian. Maybe he was draconian. That's possible. He came to visit once and was like very pushy about like, did you find anything? Where did you go? And like, how is, like, he really wanted the information from us, which was really scary. And we told him all that we could, but so we went on 12 jumps, one a month. And usually what would happen is we would end up in either a desert somewhere where you couldn't drink the water. We would end up in too cold atmospheres where you couldn't even get out of the vehicle. There was just so many different scenarios of these just ridiculous planets that, I don't say ridiculous lightly, planets that we couldn't survive on. That's what I mean by that. And so it gave me huge respect for Earth.
Why do you think this is all kept a secret?
In my personal opinion, is that they think people are going to freak out for 2 reasons. 3 reasons maybe, but 2 for sure. 1, because they didn't tell anybody when it first started, they know people are going to be upset about that. And 2, they know that people are going to be upset when they find out that they have like higher tech medical equipment than they're saying that we have and allowing people to have. They think there'll be an uprising, I'm sure. And, I'm not going to say that wouldn't happen. I don't know. I don't know what will happen. I know that we're real close to it. I can feel it, that, the government has started to admit to different knowings and not knowings and not understandings, but like finally admitting that they have seen or experienced some type of UFOs. I mean, that's huge for us, for them to even begin that conversation.
So do you think disclosure is going to happen while Trump is the president?
That's a good question. That might be a little early. I'm not 100% sure. I know that I've seen, so when I was 15, I got to experience the looking glass, which is a machine that allows you to see into the future. And I was in with some handlers there, and they saw that I was a part of a disclosure march that happened in 2027. So that, and they weren't happy about that. They were not happy about that. So I assume it's going to come to a space where we force them to tell us the truth, right? I don't think they're going to, I don't personally think they're going to come forward and say, hey, guess what? We've been hiding all of this from you for a long time. I think that at some point they'll concede and they'll say, okay, fine, but I think we're going to have to do something for that to happen.
How long did you do the Stargate service, and then what did you do afterward?
Yeah, so I did 12 months, so 1 year, 12 jumps. And then from there, me and the girl who I was with still wanted to stay together. So we were kind of running from her parents because her parents came to see us right before we were done with that duty station. And they were not happy that she was with me because she was supposed to get married to someone else. And so me and her found another classified mission to go to Venus. So Venus was the next trip, which was amazing how we got there. So on Venus is a tiny inconspicuous shack, like in the middle of nowhere on the planet. And we had to jump from a ship that couldn't land on the surface. So there was 5 of us that put on these shields, these like bubble shields that hooked to our chest and like gave us atmosphere so that once we jumped and then got into the building and followed all these like cool, beautiful Venetian words and gold linings of just like beautiful tribal stuff all over the walls. We found a interdimensional doorway that had punched a hole in space and time. And it was a space that would take you from one dimension to another. So it was just this square, like cutout of one space and time to the other, to where it didn't have any edges. There was no like, it was glowing. The whole thing itself was glowing, but that's just because of the room we were in. But it was literally like someone had taken a stencil and just cut out in between dimensions. And as we walked through, we walked to this, you could feel buzzing and tingling all over the whole body of like whatever was happening was changing our like molecular structure, or like however dimensionally we were based, and turned us into a higher vibration, which it just felt lovely, is what it felt like. And on the other side of the wall was like a huge giant city and military base that had regular people just walking around. But I mean, it was something out of the Star Wars like Capitol movie scene, there was just beautiful, amazing architecture, sculptures. Venus was the most amazing place I had ever seen or heard of in my life.
As far as I understand, Venus is a place where it's inhospitable for humans to live. Were you like
Well,
wearing a suit, or how did that work out?
no, it's a different dimension that we were taken through from the doorway. So our entire body was taken to a higher density. So it's not definitely not on the dimension that you would see it as from here, but it is a higher density. Like we're in the third density, and it's definitely above that. I'm not sure. They didn't give a name to exactly which one it was.
Being in that other dimension, did you feel like a different person? Like you had psychic abilities, or did you feel happier in general?
Definitely happier. Also, like it's strange to try to describe, but like bouncier and less rigid. Like the bone structures weren't hard. Like the outer structure of the body was more malleable. There was actually a really amazing scene that happened that can kind of explain this. Sierra was the name of the girl that I was living with there, and she came home one day and she had a buckle that she put on, and that buckle brought up a menu, and she scrolled through it, and she could pick whatever it was that she wanted to change on herself physically. So she put like white eyes, purple eyebrows, you know, and it would change the actual structure of the way, because it was more flowing, it was more malleable, like it wasn't as like here we have the quantum physics, which like pushes and forces things apart. The physics were different there.
Would you say that's fifth dimensional or higher?
I would say it's higher than that. I wouldn't know. Fifth dimensional, I believe that us 3D humans can get to. Fifth dimensional, I believe, is psychic abilities and getting to a higher nature. But I do think there is a part of that where our physical bodies do change a little bit. I don't think they change that much. I'm not 100% on that though.
So how long were you posted to Venus?
Around 5 years, something like, I think it was 5, yeah.
And what was your job there?
So I was working with some Arcturians who had full blue skin from head to toe. They had pointy chins and they were bald. And then they had gold tribal tattoos on their whole body, which were just beautiful. They felt very feminine, very loving and caring. They had really high gifts. I didn't remember having any more like spiritual gifts while I was there. I do remember feeling happier, and so I was like their security guard, kind of. I didn't really use much of the officer school except just like the trainings and learning how to be in space and those kind of things. But I would help them. They were focused on creating botanical healing serums for the sick. So that was their job. And I was just aiding them in whatever I could do for them.
By the end of your tour on Venus, you had been in about 7 years or so, right? It's kind of,
Yeah. Some,
and then
well,
where,
no, it would have been 11 because five on our in Centauri, in Alpha Centauri, and then one on the Stargate and 5 on Venus, so 11.
all right, where did you go after that?
We went to Mars. Mars was intense. It was an underground station, and I kind of looked at it as like a prison because there wasn't any place for the beings to go. There wasn't a lot of money there. There wasn't a lot of wealth, so they couldn't really leave if they wanted to, and the water wasn't good for them for drinking, so it had to be processed, and that was a whole job. There wasn't a lot of food to go around, so there was a scene in Star Wars, I think, when they went to go get, is it Luke Skywalker, when he was real little with his mom, when they first went to go get him, and he was living in this city where everything was just tense and a mess, and it was just different beings from all over and robots and stuff. It was very similar to that vibe. There wasn't a lot of anything else going on except people trying to survive and get by.
You were back in 3D on Mars?
Yes.
I guess it wasn't very pleasurable there.
Right. Not at all. Not for me, not for the people there. Being on base, I felt very lucky that there was even a place for me to sleep that was nice enough. Because I felt, I felt for everybody who didn't have anything. It was kind of a thieving place where everybody knew that though, right? If you didn't have your stuff next to you and it was gone, like you just kind of knew that that's how things worked there. There was a shopkeeper that I stayed up, had a relationship or a friendship with, I should say a friendship. And he had like a rooster, I don't know what the name of that is, on the top of his head. And he was, I think, pale pink colored. But that place, I got introduced to a lot of different really cool beings, like big giant 9-foot tall spiders that like lived on the outskirts in these big mountains that were actually really gentle and really nice. There were these gelatinous beings that could barely walk that it's just very small arms and legs, could barely get around, but everybody was quite unhappy. They weren't, it wasn't a pleasant experience. That's a good way to say it.
Who were your favorite beings?
The Arcturians right now, I mean, I became very close with them. I ended up doing another mission with them later on. They were the most gentle beings, and you could really feel that like they were connected to the source of life so deeply that everything they said was this beautiful, like straight from God itself. I don't know how to explain it, but there was just an energy that poured off of them of that they would do anything for anyone, and yet they were strong and regal and like royal. It was a very amazing energy to experience.
It's interesting that you mentioned God. Was there any type of religion or spirituality practiced out there?
Each culture had their own, and they all had very specific rites, rituals, those types of things. So wasn't talked about. It was very secretive, not secretive on purpose, but secretive as like a respect that everyone had their own beliefs, and there wasn't a whole lot of that exchange.
Was Sierra with you on Mars?
No, Sierra left me on Venus.
Where did you go next?
We went to Saturn next, and I was about to be out. So I had a few years left, I think. So I probably did 5 years around there, something around there. And I was right about my enlistment date coming up, and I was asking to get out. I did not want to be in anymore. For me to live in space was really hard because I was one of very few humans around. And when I was with humans, it was all mostly males and like 98% males. And so, and yet I couldn't find someone on Mars to find a relationship with. And so I was just really sad. I was really kind of depressed, and I missed traditions. I missed celebrations. There weren't any of that. It was just a job. I was in the military. I did my thing and I went to my room. I made friends, of course, but it wasn't the same. And so when I was deciding to get out or wanting to get out or having a tantrum, they decided that they would give me a ship. They told me that they could have a ship made from my DNA, so it would be connected directly to me, and so that I could speak to it and it could speak to me. And there are other reasons for that. They wanted to be able to use it. So I had a 20-person fighter ship created for me. And I watched it grow from, it started in like a tube for like the first 3 months, and it was just the shell of it would look like bone. And so that's how it grew, was like, and it was its own, what do they call that?
Was it a conscious being?
It was sentient, if that's the right word, meaning it was alive. It was definitely alive. It had a personality, it had conversations with me, but it didn't have that with anyone else.
Did you have to like physically connect with it? Like hook a wire into your body at some point?
It was done through a controller in the middle of one of the rooms, and it was my handprint. I'd hold onto something, and it would activate it. But of course, once I left, there had to have been a backup system because I know that my ship is still out there. It's not, it's being used by someone for sure.
Do you ever miss the ETs that you met while you're there and wish that you could meet up with them again?
So I have some really cool gifts. I'm clairvoyant, clairsentient, claircognizant, and all of those things. And so I can deal with and do deal with other beings all the time. I have both good and not great experiences with that, including ET contact all the time. I like just last week, but that wasn't pleasant, that one. And so it's been overwhelming. I'm going to say that. These tons of memories, all of this stuff that's come back. It's a lot. And so I don't feel the need to miss anyone. I don't feel the need to miss my time out there. I know that I'll do it again in the future. I know that life is cyclical. I believe in reincarnation. I believe there's nothing to regret or miss. I just don't believe in that kind of thing.
When you say that you're going to do it again, does that mean when you're going to reincarnate and join up with the Space Force?
No, that just means I'm going to be in space again. I'm going to experience the life of living in space again at whatever point that means, whichever life that means. It just means that at some point I will get to experience that.
How did these memories first start coming back to you? And what did you do with them?
I cried and I stressed and I was terrified for a very long time. It'll be 7 years in July since I started remembering other things that happened that I didn't remember consciously through this life. It happened, I had a Kundalini awakening at age 33 years old. And since that day, I was learning about the past, and space didn't come up until I want to say 2.5, 3, maybe 3 years ago. But I had already been going through so many memories of the other projects I had talked about, experiences with ETs and things like that that is what I started with. So I started with that stuff and then continued on to remembering the space stuff last because it was all very scary. It was me being followed by people messing with my friends, people ruining my relationships, government officials being involved in some things in my life that just weren't pleasant. So I was running from 2018, not just from them, but from other people too. And I felt in danger. So it's been about this last year where I stopped being scared. I just decided I'm going to choose to live no matter what's going on. And I'm going to choose to have safety within myself. And whatever happens, happens. And I was finally ready to let the book come out this January, which I was really terrified up until the moment of actually doing it. And it felt like a relief of many, many years of stored secrets that I was finally letting out to the world.
When you were on Saturn, did you have to be in another dimension like you were in Venus?
No, we were just enclosed. So we stayed enclosed. We went straight from a ship to an enclosed building Saturn was really cool. So there was a small core. There were many bases and ships and other things happening around the center, or around the rest of the area. But in the core was a very, very small circumference. I honestly couldn't give you exactly maybe the size of a city, I want to say. And then around it was 3 bases in the form of a triangle. They love triangles in space, triangles and circles. And so there were 3 bases. There was the gold, silver, and bronze base. And the gold base was taken over, not taken over. I think it was originally for the reptilians, and they had closed it down so that no one else could use it. The silver base was used for team, how do you say that? Like camaraderie building, team building, that kind of stuff. So there was this giant, like, I have no idea how big these things were, really, really big chess board that had mechanical pieces so that it would take like 3 guys to move one piece, and they had to work together to get that one piece to move. So like entire companies would come out, and there'd be, 30 to 50 people out there playing this chessboard, getting these electronic chess pieces to move around. So like that was their idea. There were many other things that they could do, I'm sure, but that was the one that was the most notable. And then the bronze base was where beings from all over the galaxy came and had meetings about, like, council meetings about supporting the other planets, the solar system itself, keeping an eye on what was going on and who was in control of what. That's where my ship ended up being eventually, like, tasked, right? Things that we needed to do. So we would bring supplies to Mars because Mars needed a lot of help. And so we'd get them water, we'd get them food, we'd get them different things that they needed. And these huge, giant council meetings were in this very beautiful building that was, it had outside of it giant statues of beings that had gone extinct. And so it was a place of trying to keep people alive and making sure that every race had its dignity and its respect to the best of their ability. So they were there to help people.
So how did you come back?
Well, that is an interesting story. I mean, I only have so much of the memories of that, but I do remember we went and got age regressed first. So my ex had gotten out at the same time I did. And so he was there, and they were regeneration, like tubes, like on the movie. Oh my gosh, what's that called? I can see it.
Are you saying that they cloned your body and you came back?
No. So the reason that they took us into these regeneration pods that were just the size of a human, and they looked like they had bubbles in it, and then you just went and laid in there. And so it regressed your age back to the time that you were when you first enlisted. And they did that so that the cellular structure remembered the type of functioning that you had at that time. And then, this is going to sound strange, but they stopped the timeline on Earth and went and picked up my old body from where, and I don't know if anybody's seen the show Loki, where they talk about the splitting of timelines, right? So there can be more than one timeline at a time happening. They go and take the body from one other timeline around the same age I was when I left, and they brought it to me, and then put or at least the body I was in currently, and then they put me into a machine, and that removed the consciousness from one body and put it into the other, or back into the other. And then I got put back into the exact moment of the night that I had left, when I was 19.
Did it feel any different?
When I woke up, even not having the memories, I was so anxious. I had no reason to be anxious because I had supposedly been in a really nice relationship. I was in a career I had everything that I needed in life. There was no reason for the anxiety and the stress that I had. So there was just an intense amount of anxiety that showed up right when I got back.
So you're back, your boyfriend's back. Once you both are back, are you back together again? Like as if nothing ever happened?
Yes, and neither of us knew. Yes.
Was he also experiencing the same level of anxiety?
If he was, he wouldn't have told me. He's not that type. He wouldn't have let me know that.
What were you doing when you had the Kundalini experience? Meditation or something?
Yeah, I did lay down to meditate, but my Kundalini happened after one really stressful event after the next of like feeling like I was gonna die. And the intensity of that, the best way I can explain it is like broke my mind to be able to witness and experience other energies outside of this world, because it was so terrifying to be where I was at. It was on an eclipse, and I just remember like that day feeling like floating, like water rushing around me in like a snake formation. And I had no idea what that was or what was happening. And I laid down to meditate, and I put in some headphones and laid on the bed. And some my guides came through, and some of my ET friends were there. And they paralyzed my body and then turned on each one of my chakras. And like the intensity of it like lifted me off the bed and like threw me onto the ground. It was so intense. I had a very quick Kundalini awakening that was very, I mean, almost violent. It was painful and it was violent. They shot some energy into the back of my head that felt like my brain was like moving, was like tumbling around in itself. And then when I woke up, I could feel other people's feelings. I could hear other people's thoughts. And that only lasted for about a week, like that really intense level. I could only eat raw food. It was a very intense, wild experience that I had no idea was going to happen. I was not religious. I was not spiritual. It just came out of the blue.
Can you take us through the very first time you remembered being in space and what that was like?
Yeah. Oh, I was mad. I was mad. And that sounds funny to say that, but I had already remembered so much intense stuff about my life that because I was able to see past, present, and future potentials once I became clairvoyant. And the things that I had seen that, and I was shown like what parents said about me behind my back, what boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, and girlfriends said about me behind my back, and like all these wild things that were going on about the projects and the government and military. And so once they added space into my knowing, like once I became like understanding of what happened in space, I was upset that there was even more. Like I was already just so overwhelmed with the experience of my life that I was not happy. I was in an Airbnb that I stayed at for maybe like 3 days. And because I was running, right? So I was running, I'd stay in one place for like 3 days, another place for a week, another place for a month if I was lucky, another, it was just hostel, hotel, Airbnb, hostel, hotel, Airbnb. I was running from very scary people. So that experience, adding on top of it space, was a lot, but eventually it became really cool because it was this wild, amazing adventure. I needed to relax. I needed to really gain my own strength and my own self-independence, and like knowing that I was going to be okay. I didn't know if I was going to be okay at the time. The more information I got felt like the less I was going to be okay for a long time. But eventually I realized that I am not alone, that there are other people that have gone through this. and that they make it out too, and that they have lives now too, and that I can have that.
Do you think your ex ever recovered his memories like you have?
No, I know he hasn't, and I'm waiting for that call. I did tell him about it, at least a very small part, but he didn't believe me or respond well, and that's okay. It really doesn't matter if he does or doesn't. I hope he does for his own understanding of himself, because it puts a lot of like reasons together, like where the anxiety came from, where the stress came from, the reasons that I self-destructed in many ways for a long time. It really helped me understand those things, and I think that everybody should have that. I want him to have that, but I don't push him. I don't use any real names of the people in my book. I don't want to put them into a light that they are not ready to be seen in.
Do you ever remember any of the things that you did in space in your dreams?
No, not so much in my dreams. It's usually a knowing. It's like a knowing and a visual. I see my memories as clairvoyant visions. So, and there are different, I had to learn that there are differences between the astral plane and my memory, or I don't know how to, my memory visions. They just are two different things, and I can tell the difference, but I had to learn that over time. There's a lot that came with that, a lot of learning, a lot of, side balls, and a lot of, different lessons I had to go through to like really pick through, figure out what was true and what wasn't true. I had to really work hard to get to a place where it was a congruent storyline that actually made sense chronologically, which is what I did with my book. Because originally my book was all over the place because my memories came back in pieces. They didn't come back chronologically. They were all over. But I wanted people who are going to read the book to be able to understand it in the chronological way.
What's the title of your book and how can people learn more about it?
So the book's called Manipulated Memories. It's the first part of a 3-part series, just because this is going to be the first 20 and back enlistment. And there's also a bunch of other stuff in there. And then there'll be two other books after that that explain more the second enlistment and more to the story of why these things happen. It can be found at either Morgan Ray, R-A-E, johnsonauthor.com, or on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Yes, there is a chat function on my website. I'm open to just regular everyday questions. There's also, I'm an empowerment coach. There will be a book online tab if you want to spend time with me. I'm open to do events, to come sign books or talk with people or have conversations. So that'll all be available on my website.
Is there anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Yeah, so I have written a screenplay for the book. It's going to be of the same name, Manipulated Memories. And I'm looking for people who know about screenwriting. This was my first screenplay, and so I'm new to this, but I'm really happy with the results. And so they can get a hold of me on my website.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Yes, everything about this space adventure is amazing. The fact that I got to go is amazing. The Venetian experience itself is something that I wish people to all have, just to know that these types of things are out there, that there are these loving beings who speak directly from the source of life itself and like love and care for every one of us, no matter who you are. Those beings, there is just as many as those as any other type. And I want people to really recognize that they can connect with these beings if they just start with meditation. Meditating will you just got to trust the messages that come through. And once you become practiced in meditation, like the world of ETs, spirits, just anything spiritual, it opens up an entirely new world for people that is beyond anyone's imagination. It's absolutely beautiful.
Morgan, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.